I got a kind of crazy bio, but I thought it would be interesting to share. It's interesting to see, Reed and I have never met each other, so it's kind of interesting to see the American take on, because it really is a North American problem that we're talking about today. So it's interesting, but I'd like to start with like with this one. So usually the groups are a little bigger, so it's an opportunity to, so you can see here, caution, don't sit here. So I don't want you to sit. So if you could possibly get up, move around. And the game that you're going to be playing is called Squat-Scalator. And the way it works is, everybody's familiar with RPS, right? Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so we have some cool things that we do with this at school, but I want you to go around and introduce yourself. So I do some social skill development with this as well, because a lot of times kids will just run into games and they don't introduce themselves. And so I do some social skills. Introduce yourself, say who you are. And then what I want you to do is I want you to rock, paper, scissors. You guys can sort out how you want to do it, 1, 2, 3, shoot, or 1, 2, 3, then shoot. You got to figure that out. Apparently it's a real fine line for that. And then if you win, you get the squat. Okay, not if you lose. Okay, so this is the paradigm shift that we had about 5 years ago when we were doing this activity, because on the card it says if you lose, you squat. So we're penalizing by fitness, so that leads to some of the stuff that Reed was getting into, and it was a huge epiphany for this company, because I said, well, we're actually punishing the kids that win, or punishing the kids that lose with fitness, and we want to make fitness be more of a positive. So we actually switched the card. And introduce this more as if you win, you get the squat down. So you actually get the benefits of movement. So I want you to take about 2 minutes and just find somebody at a different table, RPS them, introduce yourself, RPS them, and then if you win, best 2 out of 3, and then move on to somebody else. And we'll give it about 90 seconds, okay? Once the music stops. Go ahead and get the music to start. Can you hear that? You got to hold the squat. You got to hold it. Feel the burn. 30 seconds. Try to find somebody else. All right, time. Let's bring it back. I'm always cautious that, especially when I'm around the workshop right before lunch, which usually happens. So an activity like this, again, and we'll talk about this as we look at the school day and some of the instruction or some of the pieces that you do. This is kind of how I start my day in phys ed. Like, I don't really initiate a lot of stuff. Like, I let the kids come in and they get started. They know that as soon as they walk into my environment, it's happening. So they'll see a chart, they'll see an activity, and they'll be able to go and kind of self-direct themselves in this kind of unstructured and structured environment. Okay? So what we did is this, right? This is the Hillman study, and this is what Rita was talking about earlier this morning. We've activated their brain. We've actually reset them socially as well, because a lot of times the kids that I see are coming from either an academic, or even when I'm coaching, they're coming from a different place in space, and now we're all coming together again. So how we kind of reset them and refocus them in that space is very important, and we can't overlook that. And it also gets them ready to actually learn the stuff that you want to teach them. And that's the beauty, and a lot of this research, this has been out for a while, but we're just starting to make the connections there. And Reed talked about Rady's work as well. If you haven't read the book Spark, they have it in an audiobook. I'm a big audiobook guy. It's in there too, and it's really impressive, some of the stuff that came out of Naperville. So today I'm going to be talking about movement across the school day. You're going to see a ton of overlap in some of the things that we're talking about, and that there's reason for that. because we're kind of all swimming in the same sea, right? We're all kind of trying to get at the same thing and at the same problems and really try to come up with some solutions, but I'm going to take a different angle on it. So I want to thank you for coming out today. I know it's tough. There's lots of stuff going on. There's like busy schedules. I mean, I flew in last night. I think my plane touched down around 1:10 a.m. I got to the hotel around 2 o'clock, so it's an interesting, but I really feel it's important that we share some of the things that we're doing across the country. I'm a Southern Ontario guy, born and raised, but I've had a lot of experience across the country and internationally, more in the US, but I am doing some work in the Middle East right now, which is really cool. I am the manager of innovation for Sport for Life, so that kind of takes me out of my normal comfort zone. So my phys ed supply teacher, if you saw me this morning, I was texting them to make sure that everything was launched and going right down at Hillfield Strathallan College where I'm currently teaching. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and do some learning and some sharing with me, because that's really what it's about. Thing one and thing two, really you're going to get a lot of information today, and my goal is always that you leave with one or two things that, one, you can kind of take and act on, but two, that you can kind of resonate on and build kind of some of the things or practices that you're doing. So one that you kind of, it's in the back of your head, maybe drives you a little bit more, and then that second one that kind of solidifies, or maybe it's that missing piece of research, or maybe it's that comment that kind of resonates with you. And I really like Reed's talk about the connection to video games, because I have a son right now who's, we don't let him play Fortnite, but he's really in the Minecraft world. And I shared that experience, like, really, Pixel? Like, you're really, like, his theme for his birthday, his 9 birthday at the end of the month, is Minecraft. Like, it's crazy. So, but just balancing his life, right, and looking at how we do that, because when you have a kid that's interested in technology, how do you kind of get to that? And we'll talk about that today. So, a couple of things that you're not going to remember everything. I'll share the slide deck with Marianne. I'm a facilitator by choice, but I really need to kind of figure out who you guys are. So your biggest, I'm a visual learner, and hopefully, you know, we have this thing about writing goals down, right? And making things resonate with you. So your biggest tool today that I would like for you to use, and I'll reference it quite a bit, is this piece of paper. You can use both sides. So I want you to write down right now who you are. Okay, so maybe the sector that you're in, maybe what you're passionate about, maybe how you landed to be here on this chair. But I want you to think about what you're passionate about and what's kind of got you here to this point. Like, what brought you here as a practitioner? Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a coach. But really try to be reflective on kind of, you know, who am I and why am I here? Like, as a phys ed teacher, I might come in here to kind of pick up some new slides from maybe the health unit, but who are you really, and why are you here? And while you're writing those things down, try to think about some of the activities that you like to do, or who do you like to hang out with? You know, who's that first call or that first text message when you get your day started? Okay? Who's running into your bedroom at 3 a.m. going, "Daddy, I had a bad dream." Like, that's the first person I hang out with usually. And feel free to write, stand up, stretch your legs, move around if you have to. As I said, I'm a big mover, so I won't take offense if you do that. Like, if you need to stretch or if you have a question, we can talk about it if it doesn't resonate with you. So who am I? I'm going to let you kind of know, because I think it's important that we share each other's journeys, and I'd love to get to individually know you, but I think if you can kind of talk about that part, you know, what has got you to this point? What was your physical literacy, or what has been your physical literacy journey, or what do you perceive your physical literacy journey? I'm working with a lot of the teachers I've worked with. I've been in education for about 22 years. I'm starting to see my teachers are starting to retire, so it's interesting to hear their physical literacy journey and where they're going from from as they retire and they look to travel and to do these different things. So there's a mass of slides here. I'm going to click through them super fast. But I think, so when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be Michael Jordan. And then I realized I couldn't jump. And I got super heavy in high school. And then I thought I was going to be a volleyball. This was I can't remember his first name. He was Reed. He was on the U.S. Olympic volleyball team. He was a guy that I idolized growing up to the point where I actually shaved my hair to match his. But what ended up is I ended up being a professional football player in the CFL, and I did that for 5 years. So it's interesting. I went through a lot of places and spaces to get to that space. I was introduced to physical education at Oklahoma State University when I did a year down in the U.S. If you want to talk about sport in all its wrong, go to any big school for football. Okay, 126 athletes, and you are basically a number. Like you literally have a number on, like you're branded. So it's an interesting, and I learned a lot there. When came back, went to St. Francis Xavier University. Anybody know where St. FX is? I don't wear my X ring. I just put a tattoo on my ankle. It's a lot easier to carry around. But I went there. I actually had a lot of success there. I had a lot of fun there. I learned a lot about team sport. We ended up going to a national championship in 1996. We lost, but we were 0-8 for a very long time before that. Then I got drafted by the Edmonton Eskimos in the first round, seventh pick overall. Had a wonderful 1 year out there, and then the business side of sport took over. And I ended up going back to St. FX and doing some coaching and working in their Human Kinetics department, which was where I acquired my National Strength and Conditioning Association certification in 1999. And I've been a certified coach and strength coach probably, I don't want to say 20 years, almost 20 years now. But I got the itch to go back after those 2 years, and I ended up going back and playing for the Tiger Cats for 4 more years. I just missed the Grey Cup by 1 year. I came in actually in 2000, and they won it in 99. But doing a lot of reading and reading clubs, going in as a football athlete and reading to the kids. They always wanted to see my ring, and I'm like, yeah, I don't have one. I came this year. So it was an interesting shift. I did most of my work in the Hamilton-Wendover District School Board. I spent about 18 years there. Various roles, mostly as a phys ed teacher, but I did do some grade 4. I did some grade 7 home form, like core classes, I guess maybe is what they call it up here, core classes. So I taught the math, I taught the sciences and the core English. Actually, my minor's in English. Then I went the curriculum route. I became the curriculum coordinator for Hamilton-Wendover District School Board. So we're about 113 K to 12, so down and up. About 16 high schools and the rest were elementary. So I did a lot of work around health and phys ed in that area, especially when the new phys ed curriculum came out. That was really the push because I needed to ease that. But there was also some really interesting things happening in the high schools around fitness and training and assessment. So they wanted me to go in there and really clean that up. And that's where I actually got introduced to Drew and Sport for Life was during that time in 2011. And it was an interesting conversation and workshop, and I could share that with you with another time, but it has led to me being here. I did a stint at McMaster University. I did 4 years as a strength and conditioning coach there and the director of their school programming, as well as teaching. Yeah, I work too much. So I was doing about 80 hours a week, and that's not a joke. And we really redefined their strength and conditioning program at McMaster as well as their school programs. And they ended up winning the national championship in 2011. Again, a year right after I left because I had these guys. I had these two little monkeys. Oh, Queens. Oh, I did some other work. I really started getting involved in adaptive PE. And so I got my honor specialist in adaptive, so special education, basically. And I also did my honor specialist in PE through Queen's University. So I'm a little bit of a golden gale. I call it a wingtip. I don't call it the full. I'm an X-Men true to true. But I did get a wingtip from Queen's, and I'm thankful for that. I learned a ton from that whole online and interactive courses. I had some kids I didn't have them, my wife had them, but they really started to change. My guy is now going to be 9, and Madden is going to be 4. So it really got me interested in Sport for Life because I started going into the volunteer world, right? Because at McMaster, they paid you a little bit, and it wasn't crazy, but you're dealing with the kids at the other end. And now I started getting involved in my son's soccer at the age of 3. And it was really interesting to see that whole shift and change in Ontario soccer. And if some of you are ever involved with that, you know, just the fact that you were playing smaller kids and smaller nets and like that, like it blew people's mind. Right? I'm like, well, it kind of makes sense. You want the kids to touch the ball, don't you? So it was interesting to see that shift. I'm a quasi-endurance athlete. That stopped about 2 years ago, but in 2015, I was fortunate enough to do an Ironman in Muskoka, and I'm happy to say it was probably the only time it's ever going to happen in Muskoka because they lost so much money when they ran it, so now they're staying with their half Ironman. I did about 7 half Ironmans, 6 marathons, blah, 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 all this stuff. But what I'm sharing with you is that I went from a football, a high-impact power sport, to an endurance sport. So that spectrum of learning that I'm trying to share with you is that when we learn kind of about ourselves and how we train and how we can adapt, we can apply those things to ourselves as well, right? And that change is important. As I said, I met Drew about 2011. In 2011, I can't do my math, 2012, we ran the first Ontario Physical Literacy Summit. So I was very much like Marianne and her group, right? I was coming from the phys ed world. I went to a workshop where Drew was facilitating, and he said, you know, our biggest problem is we don't have the sectors coming together. And that's my worst impression of Drew as I can do. But I remember sitting there, and I had this piece of paper, and he had this framed out thing, and he said, like, how do you get the people at that's the $1 million question. And I'm sitting there going, and I literally remember this, and I'm going, well, why don't we just invite everybody to get, like I literally was saying that in my head. And he said, write down the people that when you go home, who you're going to call. So that was in January, and we ran our first conference in September. I think it was about 7 months or so to get going. So I went back and I actually called public health, and I called the city, and I called a couple of phys ed people that I knew. And then we said, come on over. And it was actually public health that hosted for the most part, and we just had a conversation. Said, how can we make this happen? How can we bring all of our people and get them in the same room? And we spent so much money that year because, as you know, planning conferences, it's hard to get space. So we ended up at the Hamilton Convention Center, which was about $15,000, which is 2.5 times what we pay now for Redeemer College. But it was like, somebody told me, you can't do it. You're not going to be able to run it. And I said, why? We'll just call all our friends. And that's what we did, and 455 people showed up. It was amazing. We had rooms like this where we were trying to facilitate active workshops, and I remember John Bile. He works was the past president of CIRA Ontario. He was a professor in phys ed at Redeemer College, and he was facilitating a workshop, and he brought enough equipment for 40 people, and 150 people showed up at his workshop. It was awesome. So he's got a room like this, and he actually had to sit people down so that the activity could happen. And I remember him going with the pool noodles. He was looking for scissors because he had to cut the pool noodles so that there was enough equipment. So adaptations in its finest. But we ended up running that. It's now going into its 6th year or 7. I can't do the math very well, but we're running it again at the end of this month. And again, it's one of those things that I've really stepped back from and just kind of let it happen. And we're doing a lot on adventurous play and risky play this year. And it's been great because it's got a really early childhood focus, which is pretty cool because I really believe in that, obviously. So that's Sport for Life. Currently, right now, I'm the K-8 curriculum coordinator and assistant athletic director, as well as the phys ed teacher for middle school at Hillfield Strathallan College. The reason why I really bring that up is that it's taken me 21 years to get to this point to where I can actually make an impact around physical literacy. Like, it's taken me that long. I've been yelling from the pitch for that long, 21 years. HSC 1 year, completely doing everything. Everything that you dream that can do. So that means converting play spaces into ones that are more fundamentally movement sound, to changing infrastructure so that kids have a place to go and participate that is not necessarily competitive, and competitive is introduced at a proper time. That's all happened within 1 year at HSC. It's been amazing. So my message around that is keep going, because eventually you're going to get to that sweet spot and it's going to happen. And it's taken me literally 21 years. In 1997 is when I first started teaching. So I've been doing a ton of research around leadership, right? And one of the big ones that I really enjoyed is The Leader Without a Title, okay, the Rob Sharma stuff. So if you had an opportunity to listen to him or read that book, that's a great book. But I've been working a lot with Simon Sinek and really trying to get at the why. And being a reflective practitioner, that's taken me probably about 15 years to kind of figure out how to really put that reflection into action. I've always reflected and say, oh, I could have done this, this, and this, but I didn't really make that transition into actual action. I really started wondering, well, why is this happen so much at HSC, and how come it didn't happen in the other places I was at? And it really had a lot to do with the why. I really approached it with a why approach. I surveyed the kids, I collected data on the kids. I was very observational, and I took down notes around the things that were happening in the space I was at. And I really said, like, what are we trying to do? I asked the questions, what are we trying to do for an experience for students here at HSC? What is our objective? And I really started digging in at the why, and it made people shift in their chairs. What do you mean the why? We're joyful and purposeful. Well, what does that mean? And what does that mean when they're outside of academics? So we really started to look at that and the why. So I challenge you, or one of the questions I would like for you to kind of think about or resonate with is, what is your why? Right? What has brought you to this point, or what is your belief around physical literacy? Like, what is that 1 or 2 lines when somebody says, hey, I heard you went to this Movement Matters. What was that about? What is that response? What is that belief system that you are sharing with it? Is that, yeah, I got a bunch of tools and I met a lot of great people, or are you there now telling them and sharing with them your why? And if you don't know what your why is, then some of the hows and the whats kind of get lost, right? And from Senek's work, he really focuses on that belief system. Okay, so take a moment right now, using your piece of paper, put a line under it or a divider, however you want to do it, underneath the who you are, and try to think about right now, what is the why of why you're here? Like, what is your belief system around physical literacy or movement? So when we look at physical literacy and what it does for kids, so I'm going to focus a little bit on kids, but I think a lot of it can be applied. It's very universal. My expertise is in pedagogical learning, especially in the middle school area. Just getting into my EC, early childhood stuff, which is kind of a new realm for me. So when you look at your why, and we think about kids, Drew shared this, but what were some of the reasons why we think kids should be active? Just shout them out. What's it do for them? Brain development, for sure. Health, general health, right? Fighting diseases, all the, what else? Happiness, mental health, for sure. Yeah, the social side of it. Have fun, right? Right? Like, enjoy where they're going. Yeah, enjoyment. Yeah, so you guys nailed them all. Better productivity, I think, is one that we kind of think about in education, especially when in high school. I've been dealing with some high school change models, and it's They want the kids to be productive, right? They want to get them off their devices, and they want them to actually get on the ground. So that productivity not only physically, but in terms of digitally as well. What about play? Or just a few. So I stole this slide from Dean Kraylars, right? And I think he stole it from the lady that that was doing the 80 determinants of play or of happiness. And this is kind of where but look at all those things that it does for us. So when we think about education, especially in my world, and we think about, well, what does it do for me? This is all research based. Like I didn't make this up. Like nobody would argue that. Nobody would argue this, right? And nobody would argue these. So why are we getting stuck? Oh, that one? Yeah, that one's cleaned up. It's funny because if you're around Sport for Life long enough, the evolution of the slides it's crazy. Like we've been talking about this stuff for a decade. Like it's insane. Like this research is so old. This is relatively new. And again, I would challenge you not to call it risky play. I would call it adventurous play. Because as soon as you say risk, everybody goes high. My wife is the exact opposite of me. She is my yin to my yang. I am like, jump off the furniture. She says, sit in the furniture. Like I have videos of my daughter, and there is no wife present. She's climbing the furniture. She's diving on stuff. Okay? She is the adventurous play. My son is he's like Reed's son. Hey, great job. Nice pass. He was picking the dandelions for 3 years in soccer. Scored his first couple of goals this year. We went exactly 0-14 this year. And we had so much fun doing it. But that's a whole other story. So what is your why? Now I'm going to move into, so the why part is an interesting one. I wanted to add to this too because I was thinking about like, how is it that I got to my why? And there was this you got to look it up. It's the Crazy Dancer. Have you guys seen that leadership one? And it's actually the First Follower. It's called the First Follower. But it's about this guy, and it looks like a Woodstock, and he's kind of going, he's dancing, he's going all crazy, and people are kind of looking at him, and they're like, and then this dude comes in, and he starts dancing. And the premise is that it's not necessarily the leader, but it's that first follower that really takes the risk. Because he is now believing in your why. And then from there, it's not as socially awkward when the third person comes in. And then what happens is momentum starts. And then all of a sudden the masses come in. And it's a great visual representation of you might not have to be the leader. You might already know who that is. But you just need to go in there and support with your why. So for me, it was parent-driven. Like it solidified when I became a parent. And I started seeing the volunteer system. And I'm like, I need to tell people that this is not very good. And share with them maybe some better ways to do things. So that was my why, and that's how I got to where I am. And my belief is that we can change for the better around that, and that we can create foundations for kids so that they can have as many opportunities as they want. And that includes healthy opportunities. I don't think kids shouldn't eat candy. Right? I think there's a balance mechanism here. I ate candy when I was a kid. I'm relatively healthy. Right? The stick. Remember that stick stuff? Like that's pure sugar. Okay, but it's something that we have to kind of figure out. So like we don't have soda pop in our house, right? But we have ring pops. So it's like figuring out what that balance is and why you're doing things. So now we get into the how. So if we kind of have an understanding of what our why is, so my belief around that balance and that ability to build programs as a foundation, and then moving into the what, the how. And we have done a ton of work on the how, right? Like you saw those posters that were alongside participation. So it was interesting. Participation actually came to OPLS and surveyed all the delegates. And you know what they did? They got us drunk. It was really smart. Yeah, they've wine and beer and food. And then we broke out into these breakout groups. So give a phys ed teacher something to drink, and the tongue just goes, right? Because inhibitions go down, and it's like, this is what needs to change, right? So it was had the charts up, people were coming, like it was a general Like it was this open bar outside, I remember, and it was like they had their posters up and they're recording these comments, and it was great. It was awesome. But what happened is they kind of got at the root of some of, and one of the biggest things was these aligned resources. Like, how is your message the same as your message? And so they had to figure out what that looked like, and they needed to rebrand because they were going down. Like Hal and Joanne, like they let them down. That was 40 years of like, let's go, let's go. Like, and I bless their hearts, it was good. I remember the commercials to this day. But we really did, we got at the activity part, but we didn't really get at the competence part. And that's really what our movement is talking about, the how. So you see a lot of this, and this is probably one of the in my opinion anyways, one of the biggest ones that resonates with me, is we want to minimize that sedentary behavior, right? Because that sitting is the new smoking in reality. So it doesn't matter what, you can apply this to anything, as a parent, as a workplace manager, as an educator. So this one, when they pulled this together, this made the most sense to me. Last night, I was 5 steps away from 25,000 steps. 5. So I did 25,000 steps yesterday. That's how my day was. It was crazy. Organizing teams, it was nuts. And the reason why I bring that up is I felt like I worked out yesterday. Like I got up this morning, I'm like, oh man, I'm tired. Now I'm old, but like I worked yesterday and I didn't touch a weight, I didn't play a sport, okay? But again, it's now looking at that, if I'm looking at fitness, if I'm looking at movement quality, again, it's that balance. Like how do you offset and balance those things? So I gotta work on some flexibility, maybe do some strength training, okay? Maybe do some more higher intensity so my heart rate gets up, because my heart rate was pretty average. But I did get my movement in. And again, this is what this chart shares with us. It's like, what is the sweat that you're doing? What are the steps that you're doing? How much sleep are you getting? I don't get a lot of sleep. Okay, mine's like, woo, I might get the inverted 4. It's like, woo. Like my daughter runs in almost every night at 3 o'clock, right? Like, and she's asleep in like 15 minutes after that. And I'm like lying there going, okay, I'm not going back. My brain started. And then the sit one, like my work sit is probably my sleep. Right? Especially when you're planning on the weekends, like it's inverted, okay? But a great resource, something to share and something to anchor some of the programs. This one was great because I like to pull stuff from different places and spaces, and I wanted one that kind of summarized it, and this was nice because it actually had, right up. And this, so which one do you think is the most important? Besides the fact that they're all important. If we think about the windows that Drew talked about. Like if we want to set foundations in place, which one's the most important? This one right here. Guaranteed. So my son was bubble wrapped, put in strollers. We went everywhere with a stroller. Hated it because the stroller is like 800 pounds. It was like a friggin' small SUV. Daughter, nope, she walked everywhere. Right? That and she's like me. She can't sit still. Whereas my son was very docile. And their physical literacy development is completely different. Like the things that she's doing at this age compared to where he was is like, it blow your mind. This one here, again, this is coming from the Public Health of Ontario.ca, parental support. This is current. Okay, 180 minutes per day. Right, so we hear participation saying 60, MVP, A, 60. No, the reality is 180. Okay, especially in that time frame. Like the majority of their time should be outside or exploring their environment. Now I'm, like again, my wife, as I said, my yin and my yang, I love her. But, so I made our house a play space. Like it's crazy. Like our couches are rattered and torn, their balance beams, they're jumping, they're obstacles. We've created play spaces there. We gotta get outdoors more, we know that. That's not facilitated. So that's my weaning process. No, they're not going to get stolen. Because if they get stolen, they're going to hand them back because they're both crazy, right? So it's an education, and it's a slow education of that. And then 5 to 17, 60 minutes a day. This is another one, just aiming more towards us as adults. Okay, about 150 minutes. Anybody got a tracker? You got those trackers? Does it tell you what to do? It says, hey, you're short. Wait, short? Mine stopped saying you're short when it came to the heart pumping one. It doesn't say it anymore, right? Because I'm always under. I don't get my heart up. Okay? 10 bouts of activity, and then again, the growing of the strength training. So lots, okay, so that's the activity, that's the heart pounding, that's the sedentary. So I did categorize it, so sedentary work, the minutes, the heart pumping minutes, and this balance equation, this food equation. This is one I was telling you about, okay? When we were kids, so if you're 70s, I was born in the 70s, okay, or maybe even before that, or after that, but it was probably about the when we started talking about it a lot, in the 90s probably. But this balance equation, right? And this is Hal and Joanne's thing, right? Eat right and stay fit or whatever. But this balance equation is key. And this is one of the things I tell my kids, because there's like keto out there now, and there's paleo, and there's eat more fruit as a vegan, and there's a vegan, like real vegan, and there's like a half a vegan, and then there's so much information out there and so much change and difference. But what it really comes down to and what the body knows is caloric expenditure and caloric intake. And everybody's going to kind of eat it or, contain it in different ways and expend it in different ways. My metabolism is completely changed. I used to be 285 pounds, right? So my eating caloric intake was massive compared to what it is now. Okay, my metabolism when I was 28 running around to where I'm 46 hardly running around is different. So my intakes are different. It's changing. We can't just say, oh, it's this. That's why the food guide has done us wrong. That's my personal opinion. Okay? I like this one. I think this is relevant, right, in our process-based society, and this is one of the messages I tell the kids. You can call it a diet or a fad diet, but the closer you can get to the stuff that you pull out of the ground, the better it is for you. And that's kind of, so eat real food because it doesn't have a label. So we all do all this work around nutrition labels and reading them, and the first ingredient is the most, and the reality is go eat the stuff that doesn't have a label. So we have all these great concepts, and they're research proven, and they know that they're better for our health, and they make us live longer, but yet we're still in that deficit. That's still that massive. And I didn't want to take on that lens that you guys all know the numbers. That's why we're here, right? I wanted you to look at this more in a positive way. These are some of the solutions. We have them out there. It's how you message them. And that's really to my next point is how, now that you have this information, you knew this information, some of you are nodding your head for sure, but how now are you going to use this information? So that's my next challenge to you to write down is knowing this information and hearing Reed talk about sports in the student-centered or athlete-centered approach and listening to Drew talk about those windows of opportunity where kids are most pliable and getting kids ready to learn through activity. How are you going to apply some of those things? So taking that belief and now putting it into some tangible hows. So how are you going to make that happen? Write that down. And again, if you don't have it, that's fine. Could come to you later. Like again, I told you I struggled this for like 20 years. And the how has to be personal. It has to be something that you see yourself doing. Okay, going in and telling the principal that, hey, you got to make the kids sit less is not the how. It doesn't work. I got up in front of 217 principals and delivered that message. I actually got them out of their seats and made them do the squats-lator and a couple of other charts. It doesn't work because they didn't see or understand the belief system. It wasn't part of their belief system. So now we're going to go to the what. And the what is probably the easiest part. This is what we sell, right? This is what we do. It's a pretty easy concept. And this is where I spent most of my educational career at the beginning is I was really stuck on the what. So is physical literacy the key? Is it the missing link that we've all been talking about? Drew talked about the value system. This thing, I love. So again, 210, we were like figuring this all out, right? Actually, before that, we were looking at, Margaret Whitehead stuff. We realized that it actually came from the US. It was a military concept, physical literacy. It's been JFK did a speech on it. Okay, like it's been in the water system for years. Okay, Hal and Joanne are just another example of how we kind of morphed and changed that. But the first thing we need to understand in terms of our messaging is that it is a journey. It is not a destination. Okay? You don't all of a sudden cap off physical literacy, right? Like your word count caps, right? You get around 60,000 words, and then some get a bit more, but there's a kind of a ceiling to that. Physical literacy is a journey. If you're alive, you're on your journey, because we're all moving. Fine motor skills to write, sitting, muscles are firing, okay? Synapses are working. Okay, it's a total journey, and some of it might be in the woods, and some of it might be rehabbing a shoulder injury. Okay, but those are all part of the journey. It's different for everybody, right? The magazines, if this got out, the magazines would all, like Men's Health, Women's Health, can you imagine? They wouldn't run this. What do you mean? No, you have to look like this. You have to do this, right? That's how they sell their what. But the reality is everybody's different. Okay, and it's different, and it changes. Gosh, it changes. I have 75-year-old hips. That's what my OPT told me. I have to get both replaced. She says, if you can make it to 55, then we probably only have to do it once. That's what she told me. That's my goal right now, is to make it to 55. So I went from running, like training 20 hours a week, bikes, running, swimming, to like, how am I going to manage this? I can't run. I can't bike, right? So my trajectory right now, if I was going to draw this, I'm probably like going like here. I'm going down, baby, right? I'm just trying to survive, right? And I hate guys like Drew, because Drew's like, yeah, I didn't move in Penticton. And the course is just outside my, 300 meters from my, I'm like, yeah, like I want to hear that, right? So you balance your active friends. But it is in different places and spaces, and opportunities present themselves, and we shouldn't neglect that. Like there's an opportunity here. Like if you were my kids, maybe the table is an obstruction. Maybe that, like how we look and view our places and spaces. Why can't we let kids get wet? Why can't they get cold? I never understand that. Like in our place, if the wind chill is minus 17, the kids don't go outside for recess. I says, pardon? Can you imagine if I was in Nunavut? It's minus 17 almost every day. Okay, like the policies that we govern kids with are just absurd without really research. Because one parent calls up and says, my son was cold. Yeah, what did you do about it? Right? Teach him to stick his arms in his armpit or in his crotch. Tell him to get close to his friends, whatever. Give him a solution. Don't pull everybody off the playground. And you all know what's happening in Ontario, right, with the hard balls and the cartwheels and all that. Or the cartwheels up here, wasn't it? Northern, wasn't it? The kids couldn't do cartwheels. They banned it from recess. North Bay. Yeah, it was crazy. So again, I'm not taking the negative. I'm taking the high road today. But that stuff is actually happening. So participate in confidence training. So do you think my wife is present? So she's 3 here, right? Absolutely not. And I'm way back. Like I'm over here, and she's doing that. I'm like, oh, don't fall. In my brain, right? I'm like, don't fall. Please don't fall. I don't know how I'm going to explain that to my wife if you fall right now. But she did it. She went up, and it was funny, because when she got to the top, she didn't know what to do. Because whoever designed this didn't design it with an outcome. So at the top, she should have been able to climb into the ship, but she didn't. Now, if I do this today, she would try to climb into the ship. Like her confidence to actually climb and do different things is like through the roof. Like it's insane when we give them this permission to do this and fall and fail, and she makes me laugh every single day. We need to realize that physical literacy is across the sectors, right? Like we wonder why we have a trade problem in Ontario, because we don't, well, one, Harris pulled out all the trades out of middle school. That was a Dutch cheeseburger, like, right? Just like Ford's trying to pull out the phys ed, so kids can learn about themselves. Wow, what? Anyways, again, stay in the high road. But there are significant, like vocation. Like, who's going to be our next firefighters? If 70% of our population is obese, who's going to be our next firefighters? Imagine what their salaries might be, because there's only going to be an elite few of them. Okay, so think about it. And they're worth every penny that they get, right? Like I would not run into a burning building. That's not my gig. Okay? Performance arts, leisure and recreation, activities of daily living. I lived beside a 99-year-old lady, and I'm thinking, okay, she's going out. She wants to pull her weeds. Okay? She wants to take her garbage to the curb. Blind as a bat. Blind. Blind. Saw shadows. Right? Lived there. She was actually from Aurora. Great lady. 99. I moved in. We lived there for 10 years. I moved in. Second year, I'm like, oh man, I gotta go help this lady. Like, it's crazy. Like, she's... So you know what she said to me? She said, you know what? It gives me purpose in the day to go out there and do those things. Crazy. Whew. Little memory, sorry. Gotta drink coffee. Sorry, a little memory. But what she was doing, right, she was 92 at that time. She was doing a lot of prevention, right? She was getting herself moving and active and getting out there. I still helped her. Like, I didn't want her up on the ladder, so I'd clear her gutters out and stuff like that. But we managed it together and we worked together. It was funny because my dog loved her. We talked about this cycle, right? And again, I wish I was that bendy too. But there is outcomes for each of these, right? When they have the confidence and that ability to explore and that creativity, that's when you see the LeBron Jameses of the world and the Michael Jordans. Or the kid that is like, you're sitting there going, wow, I can't believe they're 10. Because they've given or been given that permission to develop that talent, and they've utilized that genetics to make that happen. And that creativity. And we got to foster that creativity and allow those things to happen. And a lot of that comes from free play and unstructured environments. Drew talked about this participation leading to fitness. For sure, participate. Right? It doesn't have to be this, this, and this. It can be a variety of things. I mean, when I go and kayak, okay, that is just as good as any shoulder workout I've ever done. Seriously, right? So again, figuring out what that fitness looks like for you, and then that fitness leading to some durability. And this is interesting because in my world right now, that's where I'm living. I'm living in the durability. How do I stay to 55, right? And still be a good physical educator that can demonstrate, that can motivate, and still be able to come and talk about how being movement and be still restricted in that way. So this is the complex one. So everything that Drew did in that activity, remember when we did the activity and you had to switch? That lives in this cauldron. Okay, it all lives up there. Okay, the error reduction, the motor competence. So we start off with fundamental movement skills, right? That basic ability to squat down, to be able to run, walk, that kind of stuff. Those foundational things that we do in ECE, the gross motor stuff, the fine motor stuff. That kind of gets, and then we start learning the vocabulary. Kids understand what a hop is, or a jump, or a gallop. We kind of teach that to them. And then from there, they're able to comprehend those things. They're able to create some awareness, be able to have some selection in what some of the things they're doing. So if a bus is coming down on you, and you don't have those things, what happens? It's Roadrunner. You're dead, right? Because you don't even know how to select the proper sequencing of movements to get out of the way. Well, how do you modify that? Well, what if it's in the snow? Or what if it's in the rain? That completely changes your selection and how you're going to do things, right? And that diversity in environments allows us to do that. If we restrict kids in snow, if we restrict kids in rain, well, then we're narrowing that ability to select and process and be successful in those environments. And we need them to fail to learn. And that's the hardest part as a parent. You got to let them get a little banged up, right? They got to scrape themselves a little bit, okay? And my daughter is crazy. First thing when I hear a big thud, I'm okay. From the other, I'm okay. Was it your head? No, just my chin. That's kind of your head. So this free play, that free play leads into, so again, it's this massive cauldron of things. But when you're talking to educators, when we're talking about the importance of it, I think the critical thinking side is often missed, right? We're getting more into the creativity, but the critical thinking, like think about an athletic endeavor, like a receiver, okay? I'm a football guy by trade. Like when he's running out for a pattern, he's reading the defense, he's reading the grass, he's trying to figure out how he's gonna cut. Like all these processes are happening before he even catches the ball. But what do we focus on? Him catching the ball or dropping the ball. But there were so many other things that happened prior to that. And I was talking about communication the other day to my class, because we're doing cooperative games right now, and I said, imagine if a quarterback only threw the ball if the receiver heard him. So in a stadium filled of like 85,000 people, and guys running and guys grunting, and the quarterback goes, "Hey, Billy!" So verbal and nonverbal communication is just as important when we're talking about activity. So just changing our shift of thinking in terms of what that looks like in terms of creativity. We know this. This is proven. Okay, this just happened. This happened in Ontario, actually. And we know that if we just add step counts, just more movement, like walking to school, that they're actually more competent because they explore their environment. They create things, and they have to critically think. And we know that if we assess them then, they are actually better movers. Like, this is proven research. Okay? How do kids learn? We got to know this. Mimicry and repetition are the two keys. So we got to give them those environments so that they can practice. It's not just PE's problem. It's not just sports' problem. Okay? It's a community's problem. And it's a community solution. That's that one Drew saw. So we want to move from this amount of Lego blocks. So when the kids leave me in grade 8, I want to go from this to this. I'll do that one slow-mo. This. I did that on my dinner table. But what do you notice about the blocks? You see all these crazy different ones? Right? There's there and there. So that's you playing on the snow. This one's a little bent. This is when you playing on the apparatus, the playground gym. This one's a little longer, so that's you balancing on the playground equipment. It's different, too. It's not just the galloping, the skipping. It's the slithering and the crawling and the commandoing and whatever. And this one right here, I love this one. This is the stuff you make up. This is your virtual world. How do you move in the digital world physically? So my son does this all the time. He plays Minecraft, and then he goes out and he actually plays it, like physically. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I don't want the zombies to get me. I'm like, okay. All right, let's run with that. So this is why you're here today. I got to get going, moving across the whole day. So somebody challenged me the other day and said, can education really get to those numbers that we talked about? And my answer is yeah, for sure. And that's how you do it. Okay, if you total those up, I can't remember what the exact total is. It's like I have it here written down. So it's 2 hours and 20 minutes within the school day. And that's not even a crazy school day. Like, that's a 40-minute recess and a 20 in the morning. That's about 5 minutes of activity in your literacy and math blocks. That's not like every 20 minutes getting up and getting the kids moving. Intentional by design is key. It can be done in this school. It can be. I'm telling you right now, it can be. And how we support that as a group. Okay, before and after, here's some examples, access to playgrounds. Like, I was at schools where they didn't let the kids out on the turf when they showed up. So they all stood, 600 kids on the blacktop looking at each other. And then the kids that wanted to play were trying to play in between there. Right? Like, it's bizarre what we do as adults to minimize that. Play groups, cultural games, play volunteers, activities. And this is before and after school. It doesn't have to be just sport. What are the other 85% of the kids doing if they're not participating in after-school athletics? Well, they got to do something. Okay, so we can put that in there. So athletics is part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And these are some examples. This is recess. So this adventurous play. And again, there's organizations that, like Drew talked about, like the loose parts one. That's huge right now. Pretty easy to do, lots of adventures. One of the ones that I always cringe, and I went, HSE like is bad for it. Like, we don't have blacktop markings. Like, ours are like ancient. Like, our parents pay $24,000 a year to go to our school. And we don't have proper blacktop markings. Like, I want to poke my eye out. Like, that's an easy one, right? Diversity of games, right? Allow kids to kind of figure out, they can make their own games out. But you want to teach them in class. Great way to build in your community culture, right? Some low organized game stuff, pathways, step counts, challenges, whatever you want to do. Snow Angels is one for the inner cities that we talked about. So they collect hats and toques from other schools, maybe more affluent, and then they bag them up and they send them down so kids can actually get outside and play at recess. I know a couple of teachers that used to, their kids, when they grew out of it, they kept it in their classroom, and then if a kid came and you have one or two kids that forget, loners. So they can get outside. There's no excuse then, right? Removing those obstacles. During instruction, I mean, we do this really well where I'm at now, like in terms of events. Turkey Trot's ours. We're going to do Hoops for Heart this year. Jump rope, PL play days, all that sort. Fitness Fridays, walking and wheeling Wednesdays. This is, again, that sedentary, removing those long periods. Like just being intentful, right? And mindful of that is really the key. And thinking about that. How much are they sitting? Sitting on the bus. My guys, on average, so 31 buses come into our place every day, and the average kid rides about 50 minutes. So they're almost on their butts for 2 hours before they even get into the instructional part of it. And this is what my message was to them, and we changed it. So they have flex time where they choose. Kids, their time in class is very minimized. We have about, if we're looking at across the school day, our kids are around 23% of movement in a school day. That's an example of one of my phys ed classes. Okay, so I do have some of this if you guys are sharing it. It's called the GLAD, we changed this to Getting Started. But the kids self-direct this. I don't direct this, they do that. Am I intentful? For sure, right? So you got a core activity, because we know that core helps us with our fundamental movement skills. Reed talked about that one. No laps, no lines and lectures. That's the easy one. If you want to have a conversation with a teacher, what are you doing to minimize that? Or your coach? There's some good resources for you, and again, I'll share this with everyone. Okay, Active for Life does a ton of stuff in the young kids space. There's lots of great books out there. Play Sport's all free. Sierra's got a bunch of free resources. At My Best is a great program, especially for the younger focus. These are some people. So for me, my learning or my professional learning network's got to be quick. It's got to be fast and furious. So this guy right here, Jeremy, does the Drew stuff that you just did. He does those types of activities in a space that's probably about this big. Great guy to follow. P.E. Nathan just came from Singapore. He's now out in BC doing a lot of stuff. iPhys is his company. ThePhysicalEducator.com is another one. Joe Eisman, Reed talked about a little bit. Researcher by trade. Everactive Alberta does a bunch of stuff. Dean Dudley out of Australia. Ted Termerksoglu, who actually builds the charts. This one is a great resource for like the wall charts, like the 7 reasons why kids participate, like, placking those and putting them up. This is out of the UK, tons of stuff. Coach Nate B, okay, does another, him and Jeremy are kind of my CSCS guys, my strength and conditioning guys that do crazy stuff, right? I'm like looking at my fitness program completely in a different light. Doug Letty's out of Alberta, another researcher. Move, Live, Learn, I went to school with her. High Flyer Soccer, she does tons of research. She's written, I think, 3 or 4 curriculums. Great lady, Amanda Stanek. Let Us Make Time is one out of out of Hamilton. She does a bunch of recess stuff. She's got a lead program where actually students lead students, and it really takes those playground markings and makes them meaningful, and then it's a kind of a weaning process. So some purposeful people. We're developing this right now. It's called the School-Based Physical Literacy Checklist. Okay, so this is for your administrators and for your teachers to self-assess. And on the second page, I didn't put it up there, is actually the look for. So what your administrators might see, what the teachers might be doing, and what the students should be doing. And align some of those practices that we want to see in good practice. And again, this is in evolution right now because we have the quality sport checklist. I said, why don't we make a school-based physical literacy checklist? And we got away from making the schools accountable for activity, right? The DPA initiative came out in 2006, and we haven't put anything in paper since then. Like what it should look like. So this is why this has been, and I would love feedback on that. So once you guys get into that, this one is we want to be on the same, these are supposed to be feet, so it must be because they're blue. But we want to have this, right? We all want to be on the equal playing field. And right now, as you know, literacy and numeracy are driving us, but we cannot ignore that anymore. So now finishing off, your what? So what? So your last peep, write down something you can do tomorrow or what you can do with your skills and expertise. Now that you solidified your belief, now you kind of know how you can do it. Solidify right now what you could possibly do tomorrow or who you could connect with. And if you're thinking of your circle of influences, is it something that just you change? Yesterday, and I always do this every time I travel, I never take the escalator. Never. And I am the only person, doesn't matter if I'm in Toronto or Thunder Bay, I am the only person, I shouldn't say the only person in Toronto. I do get a couple of people that follow. But I'm the only person using the stairs. Right? Just doing that. Just being the example. You don't have to say anything. Just do it. And then people are like, whoa, why is he taking the stairs? Get them thinking. You know, what are you going to do with your family? How can you change things? Again, I know my wife is she's a risk monger, right? She's like, where's the bubble wrap? So how do you manage those? What about your friends? I've had a lot of conversations about, like, my friends' sons are now getting into the specialized time, and they're like, should we specialize? I'm like, I don't know, should you? And you open that dialogue. Well, what does it look like for you? Can you fit it in your family? How are you doing injury prevention? How are you allowing them to have some fun and do those other things and still be social, right? Like my friend of mine wants his son to play baseball, right? And this baseball thing is like crazy because he's going into grade 10 and they want him to play baseball the whole year. And what can you do at your community job? This is, again, for me at HSC, it's been the dream. Okay, I ran into a lot of walls prior to that, right? And a lot of frustration and a lot of, are you kidding me? The research is there. And then what can you do for Canada? And again, luckily for me, I've been able to meet with you guys and chat and connect with people across Canada. And as I said, I'm doing some work in the Middle East, which has been amazing. Tons of learning for me, but tons of learning for them as well. And as Reed said and Drew alluded to, it's a community approach, right? We can't just think that it's going to happen one person at a time. We got to get the forces together, get the sectors together. So my last point, and this is why I love Twitter, because you get these tidbits. When will what we know, so from what we know, change what we do? We've been on this journey for 10 years already. Okay? When are things going to change? And I think if we look at it as a collective and as a community, that's when the solution and the change is going to happen. Okay? Thank you. There's my deets.